The thoughts, opinions, and general overall shades thrown on High at 9 News are those of the individual speakers and not those of High at 9 News, its audience, or its advertisers. The statements made do not constitute medical, legal, or financial advice, and for advice tailored to your specific situation, please consult with a licensed professional. Welcome to the High at 9 News Hour, where you will hear from cannabis industry experts and professionals from around the country talk about important topics while shining light on global issues and discussing cannabis as it relates to politics, regulation and reform, data and technology, science, research and medicine, family and parenting, art, celebrities and entertainment, fitness, sports, mental health and wellness, and plant-based medicines and entheogenics. Together, we are building a stronger community, fighting the stigma and creating change. With your hosts, Jason Beck and Rico Lamitte, joined by special industry expert correspondents from around the country, and daily antics brought to you by Cannabis. Coming to you live every Monday through Friday at 9 a.m. Pacific Time and high noon on the East Coast. And thank you all for getting high at 9 with us. Oh, yeah. Good morning, everybody. That's right. It is Monday, April 22nd, or as some would say, it's 4/22 today also. What do you think about that, Rico? Today is also National Jelly Bean Day, National Girl Scout Leaders Day, National Earth Day. I know all you little greenies are excited about that. And today also is the start of Passover, you guys. Thank you all for joining us and getting high at 9 with us. It's also high noon on the East Coast. And please remember to like, share, and subscribe to us on all social media platforms. You can look up above on your screen to see exactly where we live on the internet. And we are live every Monday through Friday on YouTube, Rumble, Twitch, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and on our very own website at www.highat9news.com. But kicking it off first, that's right, we have the dope dad himself who has to make an early exit today. He's going to stage left on us real fast. It's because he's all about that cash. That's right. It is the dope dad himself, Mr. Rico Lamitte. No applause for you, Rico. No applause. Yeah. Only in your mind.
Forgot Adam's still not here, so I gotta give my
give
myself my own applause
there
here.
You go.
Okay, Jason.
There you
it's
go.
Okay. Give me a golf clap.
There we go. There we go.
Done. Well, all right, man. I got a special story today coming out of Colorado. You know, because here in America, the land of the free, we're exposed to a lot of things that, you know, seem cool on paper, but in practice, not so much. You know, like daylight savings time, Jason's favorite socialism, sports gambling websites sponsoring sporting events, or if you happen to live in Colorado, weed license plates. That's right, y'all. Per Saja Hindy's reporting in the Denver Post this weekend, Coloradans have until 4:20 p.m. on Saturday, April 27th, to bid for their rights to cannabis-themed license plates in the state auction. For the article, the annual auction features 10 phrases, including 420, co-hemp, hashish, high life, reefer, among others, with proceeds from the auction going toward grants and state programs to support people with disabilities. Since the auction launched in 2021, the state has raised more than $96,000, according to a news release from the governor's office. Not willing to take the risk, or maybe you're black and you know bait when you see it? No need to worry. Just because you got it don't mean you gotta flaunt it. Bidders win the right to own the use of marijuana phrases on their official state license plates, but they also have the option to just put it on a novelty plate while maintaining the right to use that phrase in the future. Or winners could choose to resell their license plate phrase through the state's disability funding committee. Either way, Lieutenant Governor Diane Primavera said in a written statement that Colorado Disability Funding Committee has been an incredible support to the many nonprofits and local partners statewide working to improve life and increase opportunities for Coloradans with disabilities. This auction continues to be a meaningful way to celebrate Colorado's cannabis industry while making an impact on the lives of others. It's just a great cause, right? Hendy noted that last year, the DANK license plate, D-A-N-K, sold for $600 and MJ for $520. And I know this whole thing's for a good cause, but I know bait when I see it. And ain't no way in hell I'm going to be bidding $600 for the right to put a dank ass license plate on the whip without exercising said right. And if you happen to live in Colorado and you too have problems turning down hood shit when presented with the opportunity to practice hood shit in non-hood environments, it's probably your best interest not to participate in the auction via live link found at high9news.com. But, don't say I didn't warn you. I'm Rico Lamitte, the dopest dad on the street for High 9 News. What about the rest of y'all? Would you guys put this on your license plate? Weed man, Jason?
I mean, nowadays, I guess it's okay. But I used to know some people that had some 420 themed license plates, and they used to get pulled over all the time for that stuff.
You think? You're a target, man.
Target, yeah. I wonder if any of these people that get these license plates, if they're going to be subject to more robberies or anything also, because people are going to imagine that they're going to have a bag.
Only thing that's being robbed from them, someone's going to try to steal their thunder. These are awesome. They're revenue producing. Everybody likes to personalize. There's a net benefit. I mean, it's legal. I don't think you can get pulled over for odor as probable cause in Colorado. I mean, kudos to the state for being enterprising and figuring out ways to get more money out of people for very little.
Yeah, but you can get jacked for having 5 9
grams. Yarrow. Picture a black man rolling around with dank on his license plate.
Exactly.
You think he's not going to get pulled over?
Rolling into Idaho.
No.
Yeah.
Going through any of the flyovers.
Yeah. Don't roll into Nebraska, which is right next door too.
You're driving all black anyway. I don't think they need the license plate to pull you over.
That's what I'm saying.
Oh,
so
boy.
you might as well put the money up for a good cause. But I could see also, if you have a cannabis business, buying one of these for your branded vehicle.
Yeah, for the promo vehicle that you park out in front of the dispensary. Absolutely. I mean, everybody's going to be loving that license plate.
Yep. And it'll become a collector's edition later in life.
Yeah.
You can get pulled over for driving while entrepreneuring.
Yeah, I can see getting one of these and reselling it on the secondary market. They said they've raised $96,000 like already in the first 2 years of doing this, so it's a real big boost to the fund here. But I would just 100% would sell this on the secondary market. There's no way I would put this thing on my car. Maybe put it in something like on the wall, or
I'd put it in the garage in the man cave.
Yeah.
There you go.
There's no way in hell I'd ever be caught with one of these on my vehicle, on my personal vehicle.
Me either. Not a chance. Not my personal.
Yarrow would.
Yeah, Yarrow would.
No, I mean, look. I will tell you my thoughts on vehicles. After the government decided to repatriate my very fancy vehicles through asset forfeiture, I have never had a blingy car since. They took all the fun out of blinging for me, and you will only find me in vehicles I own free and clear. And I went from being bougie to, hey, Toyota. And so that's not my style. I think there was a time in my life where I did think that the really cool cars was a really cool thing. But I do think for a business vehicle, this is fantabulous. And I love that they're figuring out ways to make money. To me, this is creative, innovative, government revenue producing. People who pay for this are going to be happy with what they got. They're going to feel like they have value. My personal cars, Rico, they've been covered in dried cranberries, bunny crackers, and smeared juice boxes for the last decade plus. And so I haven't had a fancy whip in a long time.
You see the back seat? I try every Saturday morning, get up early. I got a monthly access pass to this car wash place around the corner, and I try to erase the remnants of my daughter in the back seat to no avail.
You got a car wash fast pass, huh?
Yeah.
I'm a dog hair, do not care kind of guy. I'm in that chapter.
Oh, man.
Yeah, it dried up applesauce, milk, like all different kinds of bodily fluids like seeped into the leather. I'll never get leather seats again, ever again. My next car.
Well, I mean,
and that's the facts.
So you prefer
don't run a black light over his back seat.
So you prefer to let that stuff just ferment in some fabric, then, huh, Rico? Because I think leather is easier to wipe off.
Absolutely.
You can put Scotch Guard on the fabric seats.
Lame.
Come on, Jason. Come on.
Lame.
Dad hacks.
Yeah. Let you tell it. But I think are these the only license plates that they're allowing? So like, what if someone had they wanted to put something that isn't offered? Could they still go and get?
No, there's 10.
No,
they offer 10 different choices.
I understand that they're offering 10 different choices, but what if I want to get a personalized plate and it's not one of those 10? Do I still have the creative freedom to get that, and I'm not part of this bidding process?
I don't think you have creative freedom, but you do have white privilege, so you can ask.
Oh God!
We went from black. We went from black life to the black man to Jason. Your white privilege. Mm-hmm. I don't know how you.
I don't know what fucking white privilege I have, because I don't know what the fuck you guys are talking about. But Jamie, what were you saying?
Something, Jamie.
I'm saying in Montana, the only thing that you can't have is something like lewd or lascivious. So you could have any kind. And the interesting thing about this is, cannabis is legal in Montana recreationally. Mm-hmm. About, I would say 20 years ago, if you tried to put something like this on a license plate, they would have no part of it. But now it'd be free game because it's not considered lewd or, out of taste.
Speaking of lewd and out of taste, I remember that this happened back in California a long time ago. There was a person that snuffed one by the DMV, and their license plate said 3M TA3. And so when it would go into everyone's rearview mirror, when they would see it in their rearview mirror, it basically would say, "Eat me." And they end up having to give up.
Rude. I don't think that's rude at all. I mean, with consent, that's a great time.
Light invitation.
Mm-hmm. Well, on that, we're going to keep this train rolling. We're going to roll right into a commercial, and we're going to be right back.
Let's do it.
Oh, man, that was weird. Hey, you, America. Do I look like Sean Connery? Good morning, America. Saman Razani coming to you live from sunny Los Angeles, California with the one and only highest host, Mr. Jason Beck, smoking on the best weed in the world. Did you know that we have an audio-only version of our podcast? You can find it on Apple, Google, Amazon, iHeartRadio, and Spotify. No excuses in 2024. If you haven't checked us out, check it out now. And also, check out what the Prophet's doing in 2024.
Yeah, Jamie is getting acquainted with the tapping over Jason. I love it.
Yeah, cute, guys. Real cute.
Story number 2. Y'all know who it is. He's an immortal cannabis wizard with a Stanford PhD in tripping balls. Here joining us from the astral plane somewhere, co-host of the podcast, What's Good, and to bless us with another one of his great emotional stories of the day, Mathieu St. Germain.
Thanks, Brother Rico. So now I'm the emo correspondent here for you on a Monday. I got an article out of the Regulatory Review, and I found this interesting. It's an editorial instead of just a straight reporting piece, but I think this goes in a good direction. And the title is Talk About Psychedelic Dispensary. Several psychedelics are making their way through the regulatory process created by the U.S. Food and Drug Administration for new drugs. The FDA model, psychedelics are unlikely to be prescribed for consumption at home. Rather, patients will likely have to access psychedelics as part of a therapeutic protocol and consume the medicine under the guidance of medical professionals. One of the goals of this model, called psychedelic-assisted psychotherapy, is to create a safe environment for psychedelic use. States that have legalized access to psychedelics have mostly taken this approach. The problem has increased in salience as psychedelic advocacy and cultural acceptance has gained momentum across the country over the last 5 years. There's been ongoing tension between efforts to decriminalize possession and cultivation of psychedelics and efforts to regulate psychedelics. Unfamiliar? Decriminalization efforts have made enforcement of state drug laws criminalizing psychedelics the lowest level of law enforcement priority in dozens of states. In 2 states that have legalized access to psychedelics through ballot initiatives, efforts to regulate have mostly won out. In Oregon, ballot measure 109 passed in 2020, giving the Oregon Health Authority the power to regulate psilocybin services, an exclusively on-site consumption model, which is also called supported adult use. In contrast, Colorado's Natural Medicine Health Act, which passed in 2022, has both a regulated on-site consumption model and a decriminalization of personal possession and social sharing model. Under the law, Coloradans may eventually be able to access 4 substances: psilocybin, dimethyltryptamine, ibogaine, and mescaline at state-regulated healing centers guided by state licensed facilitators. Shortly after the law passed, Coloradans gained the right to cultivate for personal possession, socially share these substances for non-commercial purposes. The law also allows individuals to be paid for providing therapeutic, harm reduction, or other support services related to the sharing or donating of psychedelic substances. Unlike cannabis, where consumers and patients buy a regulated product from dispensaries that must be used off-site, psychedelic proposals mirror FDA's approach by regulating centers where individuals may only access psychedelics on-site. By the decriminalization of possession, the Colorado law does not create a way for residents to purchase regulated psychedelics for use at home. In fact, requiring on-site consumption of legal psychedelics has impeded access considerably by producing long wait lists and increasing the cost dramatically. Due to the extended length of time of many experiences, the thousands of dollars it can cost per session can be mostly attributed to compensating the facilitators. Creating dispensaries would address these pressing issues and further the state's interest in promoting public health by allowing interested consumers to access safely the substances they want. In addition, creating a legal access point for psychedelics would remove a barrier for victims of abuse to report, since the substances could be accessed legally. Dispensaries could also create an additional potential revenue source from the activity that is already occurring. This additional revenue could help fund psychedelic regulation and address the issue of funding, which has already come up in Oregon. But this proposal is not without challenges. As long as psychedelics remain illegal at the federal level, even if certain formulations are rescheduled with FDA approval, limitations on taxes and banking will continue to frustrate the success of state-regulated psychedelic access model. There's also no official federal policy of non-enforcement, as exists in the case of medical cannabis. Set and setting, a term commonly used in the psychedelic ecosystem to describe the impact on the patient's psychedelic experience of both the setting where the medicine is consumed and the mental set of the patient, also poses questions for the dispensary model. If we create psychedelic dispensaries, it may become more difficult to ensure that individuals will use these substances safely. But analysis of psychedelic policy should acknowledge that people are already using these substances. Criminalizing or limiting access to these substances does not mean that people will not use them. It will just make their use less safe. I think this points out something that's very interesting, and I saw this also happen with the cannabis model. You know, when the medical use model came out, all of us were struck with these crazy chronic illnesses that we needed to access cannabis for. When the recreational model came to California, almost everybody was spontaneously healed. And I've always had a bit of an issue with people, though I know it's a legal workaround, always posing people who use cannabis or psychedelics as patients. A lot of us are doing it recreationally. Might want to call it spiritually. I don't like to put those kind of trips on other people. I call it recreationally, right? We need to look at this. There should be, in my estimation, there should be two tracks. There should be a clinical track for people who have trauma, early childhood abuse, all types of PTSD. There should be a track for that. There should also be a track for people who just want to contact and explore their consciousness and get a deeper connection with nature. I think this story points to maybe a possibility of a way forward with this. And I'm really interested what you, my fellow correspondents, have to say and what folks in the chat have to say. Mathieu St. Germain on a Monday for the High at Night News. Get away, guys.
Psychedelic dispensaries. I mean.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that sounds very interesting. I mean.
Do you think they should have like actual, educated folks rather than like bud tenders at these dispensaries?
I think they need to have a warning later, right at the stairwell when you walk in that says "Don't trip."
the reason we don't have knowledgeable bud tenders is because of our current capitalist service model.
Agreed.
Most dispensaries are based off the McDonald's model, where you pay people the absolute minimum. But what you end up getting is somebody with really no experience. You get a young kid who may smoke a little weed, but number one, they have barely any experience in life at all, barely any experience with weed, and they don't have the money to access the majority of the products being sold at the dispensary. The way around having non-knowledgeable bud tenders, pay people who are qualified an actual living wage. I know that sounds crazy and super revolutionary, but it would solve the problem in one day. That being said, yes, Rico, I do think that people should be knowledgeable if they are dispensing psychedelics. I think there are more possibilities of things going wrong if are not properly informed on how to do.
Yeah, and I don't mean that to disparage like anybody either. There are some very, very, very knowledgeable bud tenders out there. So I apologize.
There are some. There are a few. There's some kids who are really have a lot of passion for it. But I see the same thing all the time. I go into dispensaries just to kind of keep abreast of what's going on in the legal market. And the number one thing that happens when I start pointing to stuff on the shelves and asking people, what do you think about this? What do you think about this? They're like, bro, I can't afford that. You know, because I'm usually looking at the better quality flower, and they're just like, dude, like, so that's a $60 jar plus, $30 of tax. That's a $90 jar, bro. I'm $17 an hour.
Well, that's a failure of the brand, though, because the brand should be sampling those bud tenders precisely for that reason.
Yeah.
I think so. And when I've worked in retail sales in cannabis, I've always advocated for big giveaways. It's how you move the needle.
Yeah, and we used to give away product and, come in and do education for the bud tenders. We're getting off track, but what would end up happening invariably almost all the time is that the buyers and the store owners would take all the free stuff and the bud tenders would never see it. I mean, that happened a lot. But going back to this, should there be psychedelic dispensaries? I think I wouldn't label them dispensaries. But I think if I were I've never tripped. Like, I've done microdosing a ton, but I've literally never gone on a big trip because it's scary to me. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know how I'm going to feel. I've never done acid. So I'm just one of those people where I would want someone there to guide the experience. So if it were more of a guide as opposed to a bud tender kind of situation, then I would be down for it. And I don't know if you need to call it a clinic or what you need to call it, a safe space to trip or a rocket ship or something.
A rocket ship.
Hole.
Yeah, or a rabbit hole, whatever. But I wouldn't call it a dispensary first and foremost. And second of all, yeah, it needs to be somebody who would make me feel supremely at ease to even going down that experience.
Mm-hmm. Yes,
I agree, and I think a lot of people do need that. I would like to see personally something more along the line of a non-religious, non-denominational church type model where there's a large hall, there's some pillows, there's blankets, there's comfortable seats, there's some water, there's a nice bathroom, there's volunteers that are willing to sit with folks through these experiences. Maybe we do it on a Sunday, maybe we do it on a Saturday. One of the biggest issues with having folks sit with you is that it restricts psychedelic access to people with a lot of money, because most qualified sitters aren't going to sit down and spend this time for under $40-50 an hour. And when you look at LSD having a 10 to 14 hour duration, you know what I mean? You're talking about hundreds to thousands of dollars per trip. In the medical model, we could get to a point where the FDA will actually, and the FDA will okay it, and insurance companies, would pay for that trip sitting in that facility. But then you could have a broader amount of open access to more people. But when it comes to a non-medical model, I really feel like psychedelics need to have a different track, or non-profit organizations. Well, as psychedelic navigators need to help.
You were talking about that there's this misconception that people are always using psychedelics for medical reasons, but you're saying a lot of people use them recreationally. And so then you need to have a dual system, because if that's the case,
I agree.
That addresses everybody.
I agree 100%.
Yeah,
yes.
The only thing about dual systems, and I'm just here to disagree a little bit and keep it lively and chop it up. The only thing about dual systems is we're talking about dual bureaucracies, dual costs, dual regulatory tracks. And there is this argument that the line between wellness and medicine, between improving oneself through new experiential opportunities versus having specific traumas that are covered, is I just often feel that it invites the government to come in and overregulate and micromanage. And we've covered states where they were talking about a medical cannabis program, but they weren't initially going to cover AIDS. And we railed upon how crazy that was, that lawmakers who were not doctors were sitting there with their pencil and their checklist and deciding what medical ailments qualified for medical cannabis use. And I think the conversation, at least for cannabis, has expanded to understand that there's a very, very fine line between wellness and medicine. And for everybody, that might be a slightly different line. And so I just wonder out loud whether with psychedelics, whether there could be a singular regulatory pathway that would allow these things to not be felonies, even in modest amounts, where we create some guardrails and some safety systems so that people aren't tripping balls and jumping off bridges because they think they can fly, and where it might be for PTSD, or it might be because they like that band Fish. I mean, who am I to say?
Mm-hmm. I'd like to just say this. I'd like to stop right now. I'd like to invite everybody here to stop this whole taking acid and jumping off a building to think I can fly thing. That is a lie.
Yeah.
And it's a lie promulgated by the CIA. Based on a guy named Frank Underwood.
Frank Underwood?
Underwood. Correct.
Frank Underwood.
He worked for the U.S. Department of Defense, creating biochemical warfare agents and mind control agents. When he developed a conscience and wanted to jump, I'm forgetting the name of the laboratory, but it'll come to me. When he caught a conscience and wanted to expose the program, his fellow CIA agents dosed him with LSD, which caused him to jump out a window, although most likely was pushed out the window, you guys. There's no actual proof of anybody being with him or not. And the newspapers came up with this story, this cover story of he jumped out of a window thinking lie. It's not true. Additionally, Art Linkletter's daughter committed suicide, and Art Linkletter was one of the main people responsible for the legalization of LSD. He was an alcoholic. She had an uncaring dad. She had an abundance of problems. She took LSD one time and then killed herself a month later. And Art Linkletter, instead of looking at his own failed parenting, went on the Tonight Show, the Dick Cavett Show, and basically any media he could to blame LSD and work with President Nixon to I believe it was Nixon to illegalize LSD because of his failure as a parent. There's all these stories that have been pushed forth as memes in our media that are meant to demonize these substances, because these substances at their base level were to do these in nature quietly with a supportive group around you, people that you feel safe with. What you are going to find is you're going to be connected with nature at a deeper level and to see a fuller truth of who you are and who we are, which is a human family on a spaceship called Earth.
All right,
give me one more second. You're going to start to be far less controllable when you realize a deeper version of who you are, and you can get past the fear of your ego and the death of your ego. You become less controllable. That is why psychedelics were made illegal, because it created a huge generation of Americans that for a moment were not afraid and were calling for the end of war and for the end of fascism in America. Take it away, Yarrow.
All right. It is not a lie. I sat there at Reggae on the River. I watched somebody who was on mushrooms jump off the rocks into the water and kill themselves on accident while everybody was encouraging them to jump from a height that was too tall. I lost a friend who walked out into the freeway in the Emerald Triangle and got hit by cars because he was on LSD. Okay? This has nothing to do with the CIA.
I've never heard of those stories.
Theory. Of course not. But these are second. I witnessed this.
Yes, sir. Yes,
sir.
And
these are second degree stories that are recent. They're not historic. They're not conspiracy theories. And so the risk profile for psychedelics is worth being incredibly reverent about and trying to figure out how we get this right. And so it's one thing for a 13-year-old to get into their dad's Canagar stash and to end up eating all the Ben and Jerry's and sitting there with their eyes off their head watching infomercials at 2:30 a.m. And it is a very different thing to have psychedelics and to try to figure out how we balance the need for decriminalization versus the access. I love you because you are evangelical about the benefits. And watching somebody jump off of rocks while they were on mushrooms and kill themselves, and watching them be removed from a concert while I was simultaneously on mushrooms myself, forever changed my relationship with psychedelics, because while I understood the deep, deep teachings that I could experience if I opened my mind and allowed my creativity to be on octane booster, I also saw that in nature and in those uncontrolled environments where there weren't those spiritual Sherpas, that without a guide, this could be really, really dangerous. And I will tell you, my friend Ethan, who died because he walked out into a freeway, was not a young guy. He was not a teenager. He wasn't his first time. This was a man in his late 30s, early 40s. And it happens, and it happened, and it could happen again.
Mm-hmm. Well,
there's always a chance that things will go wrong with any substance, but according to your logic, we should then also restrict access to cars, because kids can grab your keys to car and kill themselves. No one should have a gun in their house. No one should have alcohol in their house. No one should have Tylenol in their house.
Cars require a license. Guns you sometimes require license. Cars require training. Yeah, so we should
you're supposed to be over 18. Do you have to have a license to pick up a pair of keys in your parents' house? No, you don't. So there's this constant need
to
nerf the world and make the world safe. It's completely impossible, and it goes again to people's ego death and their fear of dying. And wanting to give away their power to other people so somebody can name them as a safe person. You are now safe. There's no guns in your house. You can't even open the door without having a chaperone to go outside because everything outside could kill you. We're going to take you in a bubble to the store and buy only things that you can. Oh, wait, you can't even buy food because you can literally drink too much water or eat too much food and die. So we're going to feed you by an IV and keep you tied down, and you're going to be safe. But guess what? An asteroid could hit the planet and kill all of us any moment. A super volcano could go off in Yellowstone and destroy all of us. I think it's far more important to people how to be educated, responsible, sovereign self-navigators of this world than to try to think you can nerf the world. And again, if you think that kids should not be able to access psychedelics, I agree with that. And you think that the way to do that is then to illegalize them. You also have to make cars illegal. You have to make guns illegal. You have to make alcohol illegal, because I know kids who have died alcohol abuse from just binge drinking. So I have to say I strongly disagree, but I also respect your perspective at the same time that I disagree with you.
It reminds me of, like, I just got back from 2 months in Europe, and what I can tell you just was really salient to me is that we do nerf everything in America, and in Europe they take a completely different approach to everything. So I was in Italy and I went to jump off these rocks into the water, and it was treacherous. I had to have shoes on. The rocks were sharp. There was no handrail. Like, I had to climb down, and this was a resort area. And in the resort information, they're like, people like to jump off the rocks into the Mediterranean over in this one part, and there's a little map to it. And I had to climb down a rock, get onto this thing. It was super slippery and sharp. And I thought, this would never fly in America, because imagine somebody slipped and fell and cut themselves, that resort would get sued and it'd be a wrap. And in Europe, they kind of have the mentality of, you're a grown-ass person, take responsibility for yourself, make your choices. If you want to eat too much, you're going to get fat. If you want to climb on these rocks and jump in the water, you might get cut, or you might get hurt, whatever those things are. So I think the interesting thing is we're fighting for legalization of all of these substances. And I know, Yarrow, that you're, playing devil's advocate, and people can get hurt. And part of the adult decision I've made not to trip isn't that I've got any experience watching someone lose their life, but I'm careful with what I do to my brain because I value it and I want to have it function going on into the future. I've made the adult decision not to trip, but that was my decision to make. And I am in a world where everybody I know trips balls all the time. So I like the option of having access as an adult to the things that I want to do, and have the government trust me to make a good decision for myself, right? So the person that unfortunately jumped off those rocks, there was a whole bunch of other stuff going on. Were there other substances, peer pressure, jump, all that stuff? You can see there
was jump, and there was also a lot of gravity involved.
Well,
I don't know. I just think we got to take responsibility for our decisions, and government needs to give us that option.
You're so right about this nerf mentality, right? Because at the end of the day, there are so many dangerous things. There are so many choice points that we have on a daily basis about what to do to be safe and to preserve our physicality and our well-being. I am not an advocate that these things should be criminalized or that people should get a felony for having a gram of mushrooms in their pocket. I just think the notion of regulation is a lot more complicated than cannabis. And while we're still using a highly regulated adult use model that comes originally from alcohol and then has been perfected and expanded with cannabis to some degree, I just think that psychedelics offer greater complexity. I completely agree with what you said, Matthew, in respects to this idea that we can't have a nanny state. And Jamie, when you're saying that about that jump off point at the resort, I'm thinking about how opposite the United States is, where you can't even go to Half Dome in Yosemite without all of these obvious signs saying, hey, there's a big cliff right there. You might fall and it's going to hurt a little bit. So you guys are absolutely correct in that regard. And I totally concur.
Well, I'll tell you what, I know somebody that the police were knocking on their door, and they were high on mushrooms, and they jumped off their second-story balcony and tried to commit suicide because they didn't want to go back to Men's Central Jail. And I know of another instance that happened in the Bay Area back in the day when we all used to go to raves, and they had one rave that was on the Red and White Fleet one year, okay? And they only had this rave once, and they never had it again because there was someone that got too high on the boat and literally jumped off into the bay, and then his friend jumped off, tried to save him, and they both died.
God.
Well, you know, there's something called the Darwin Award because there's a lot of people who have not really been taught or trained or accepted the higher levels of consciousness alive on the planet. Again, I know a ton of people who have done really stupid shit sober, myself included. Never once seen anybody suggest
I remember that time you started
sobriety.
to almost jump in the campfire and light yourself on fire. You remember that?
I did not try to jump in the fire. I did roll around on the ground. But anyway, I'd like to say that what I think is that the best way forward for psychedelics is education and information instead of fear. And really the best way if somebody wants to do psychedelics is to find a psychedelic big brother or sister, find a group of people that you can trust that are doing them. That's really the way that they've been primarily done throughout the aeons of humanity. And only these last few decades where they've been demonized and hidden from us and over legislated because they interrupt the current fascist agenda that's being exercised by most governments on the planet. It's created all of these areas of fear. Like what Jamie said, I've never done drugs because I want to be good to my brain. It's the same thing Neil deGrasse Tyson and Michio Kaku say. Two of the smartest guys who have fallen prey to this demonization of psychedelics. When one looks at the actual medical scientific information about psychedelics, they cause neurogenesis. They make your brain regrow axons and neurons. They cause neuroplasticity. They make you pattern and form new, more helpful patterns for your life. One mushroom trip ends depression for a year. They cause increased blood flow to your brain. Increased blood flow is increased oxygenation, which is increased maintenance and cleaning of your brain. Another aspect of neuroplasticity is they make it easier to learn. There's an abundance of trials right now for psychedelics for Parkinson's, ALS, and other neurodegenerative diseases, as well as PTSD and depression. So the thought that you're going to ruin your brain with psychedelics is that's old school drug war propaganda, and it's not actually true. People I know who have really fucked their brains up are the people who did some psychedelics and also were horking down mad amounts of mad amounts of cocaine and drinking ridiculous amounts of alcohol. Cocaine is shown to lead to Parkinson's-like syndromes, and alcohol is a solvent that literally dissolves your brain. So I would say to anybody who wants to have a clean and healthy brain, don't worry about doing psychedelics or not. Definitely stay away from alcohol. Definitely stay away from cocaine.
Well,
I have a call with a doctor.
I
have to jam.
And that I will tell you, I've told lots of people this story. My cousin is the reason that I did the microdose, the very first one. And he said, I was like 2 years beyond my divorce. He said he hadn't seen me smile in 2 years. He said, I'm tired of looking at your fucking face, is what he said to me. And he's like, you're going to do it?
I will never tire of looking at your face.
And he goes, we're going to do this. You're going to take mushrooms. It's going to make you feel better. You're going to feel happy. We're going to laugh. We're going to sit here. We're not going anywhere. But he absolutely required that I do it. And I did it. And it really was like lifting this like dark cloud off my shoulders. It is, I would tell you, what healed my depression from the divorce, all of that. I just have never done a full-blown, like, big-ass trip where I saw the walls melting and stuff like that. That's the thing that I'm, and I don't know if it's propaganda or just, I don't like to do anything to excess. It wouldn't matter what it is. Because I like my brain.
High dose psychedelic experiences aren't for most people. In fact, the way it really ran in tribal society was the weirder ones among the tribe would kind of live along the outskirts, and they would be taught in a master apprentice way to use psychedelics. And the majority of the tribe wouldn't use psychedelics. They would go to the curandero, the shaman, the plant priest or priestess, and they would be healed. While the shaman was on the drugs, they would see the other plants this person needed to take. They would sing to them. They would put them in a trance. And so really they never were for everyone to do traditionally.
Yeah,
I think microdosing is a great way to access.
Hey guys, we got
amazing.
We got to keep this.
I got to go too. I got a doctor call. I love everybody.
Doctor call. We love you, Mathieu St. Germain. Thank you for being here today. We got to keep this train rolling. We are way over time, you guys. I'm going to roll into my first story real quick because this is a little short one and it's pretty interesting, you guys. I can't wait to hear what you guys have to say about this. Because, we just had 420 and, today is 422 also, you guys. Because hundreds of marijuana supporters attend a picnic rally and 36 of them were arrested at Melbourne Park on 420, you guys. At least 36 people were arrested at an annual pro-cannabis picnic at Melbourne's Flagstaff Gardens. The rally in the city's CBD aims to raise awareness for the legalization of cannabis and occurs annually on April 20th or 420. Adult use of which is banned in all Australian states, and about 250 people attended the event, and police dog units and local officers were on the ground searching attendees. A total of 36 offenders were arrested and processed for drug-related offenses, and most were issued citations, and 4 will receive a summons to attend court at a later date. In quotes, while we respect the right for lawful and peaceful protest, we will not tolerate any criminal activity, a police spokesperson said. It is our role to enforce the law, they said. This year's event, featuring the slogan, "Who are we hurting?" included state MPs from Legalize Cannabis Australia Party and Western Metro Region MP David Estranach and Southeast Metro MP Rachel Payne indicated they would be attending the rally. In a post to her Instagram on Saturday, Ms. Payne called for an end to prohibition, adjoined with a picture of what appeared to be a lit cigarette. In a quote, looking forward to catching up with the cannabis community today, he said. Both MPs appeared at an earlier event on Friday outside of the state parliament run by the activist collective, the Craze Co., and posts by the group show the pair in front of what appeared to be caged plants with signs reading, "The war on weed, a royal failure indeed." I can agree with that. Only about 1.7% of Australians residing in the ACT have access to decriminalized adult use cannabis, according to advocates, and adult use cannabis is otherwise illegal in every Australian state through NSW is set to launch a probe into its probation. The number of countries have legalized marijuana for medical and adult use purposes, including Canada and the Netherlands and Portugal, and NSW police have been contacted in regards to this, but no comment from them. What do you guys think about this? These people getting wrapped up at the cannabis rally on 420 in Australia, you guys. I saw some of these videos. Did you see any of these? Huh? Crickets.
No.
Crickets.
I didn't see any videos. No.
Yeah, I saw a few of them. And like one of the girls is like, "Oh, why are you doing this to me?" Da 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 da. He's like, "Give me your arm, give me your arm," and it's just more and more of the same and whatnot. But 36 people getting arrested in Australia for their celebrating 420.
I don't understand that, because doesn't Australia kind of have a pretty robust program, and has for many years?
I think this was more in regards to the adult use and not any type of medical use. And I don't believe that in Australia they allow you to consume your medical use in public.
Yeah, I mean, is that the right use of resources? Whether it's right or wrong, is that?
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
it's tone deaf on the part of the police that crack down, because Australia does have a robust cannabis industry. It's multi-million dollar. It's huge, and it's very popular. Mm-hmm. So what I'm kind of visualizing is Idaho or Bavaria, these places that are running contrary to the popular trend, because it's super tone deaf in this day and age to be arresting people that forcefully over a plant protest or celebration. It's weird. I think it's just weird.
I think it is too.
The other thing that's super weird is that it said that there were only 250 people that attended this event and they arrested 36. It wasn't that there were 250,000 people that attended this event and they arrested 36. They arrested a large percentage of a small gathering. Mm-hmm. And if you look at the pictures from the article, it shows people with these fake prisons saying, nobody should be in jail for the plant. So this was as much an advocacy event, at least at first blush, as it was a festive pro-cannabis 420 event. And so I worry a little bit about sort of, I know it's Australia, not the United States, but it really feels like it's diminishing the opportunity for free speech. If you get 250 people together. I don't think
they allow for free speech in Australia.
Well, it may not be baked into their constitution, but I'd like to think that they are a democracy and that they care about the voice of citizens. I'm not saying that the majority of Australians were represented with 250 attendees, but when you bring drug-sniffing dogs and you arrest 36 out of 250, that's going to have a little bit of a dampening effect on people's desire to be photographed in public, talking about the harms from pills and talking about legalizing it for adult use. And when I look at this article, it literally shows people with these mock jail cells, very much like 40 tons at MJ Unpacked. And so when people go and they go to these events to talk about the progress that still needs to be made in respects to cannabis policy, and you arrest 36 of them for what is likely modest infractions of the restriction on public consumption, to me, it feels a little political.
Well, it's fully political. What's going on is, Australia's got cannabis very similar to the way we have it in the U.S., where you've got some areas where it's legal and you've got some areas where it's punishable. So you've got Nebraska, Wyoming, Idaho, these places where it's absolutely outright banned, but yet one state over, like if you're in Idaho, I have cousins that live in Coeur d'Alene. They literally drive 20 miles. They're in Spokane and there's like 4,000 pot shops, So you've got this weird disparity going on between access. And it's just an arbitrary line on a map that's, if you live on this side of the line, you can't have it. And if you live on that side of the line,
you obviously, Jamie, have never watched the movie Blow. Because
I have never.
You should watch that, because Boston George tried using that same defense, saying that it's just some arbitrary line of this and this and that, and the judge said, no, this is not an arbitrary line, and what you actually crossed was an international border, and and you're sentenced to X, Y, and Z. And that's how that goes
fair
down.
enough. But what I'm saying in Australia is that you've got activists who are trying to move the needle in their part of their little part of Australia, and the government's not having it. But I think the government's tone deaf, because imagine that news story today, if there was a 250 person protest in downtown Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, and 35 of them got arrested and they had drug sniffing dogs. First of all, I'll tell you, highly possible in Idaho. That's how weird they are about cannabis. But the whole world would be like, what is wrong with you, to the police? Because they do not want it in that state. The government, the people want it. The government doesn't want it. And they're fighting an uphill battle now.
I don't even think it'd end up being that big of a story if this happened in Idaho. In all reality, I mean, I would expect things like that to happen in Idaho based off how they prosecute people for cannabis there.
It reminds me of that article we covered a couple weeks ago where that American guy in Colombia was doing those cannabis tours for like $25 and then like selling people a gram of weed for like $10, and he got arrested by the Colombian government. And I thought to myself, the value of that enforcement activity versus the bad press that was created. Somebody needed to think about what was the PR lens through which these actions should have been sort of evaluated before they were done. And so I think of Australia. I think of the way in which tourism is a massive driver down there. Australia is not a cheap place to visit. And I think about how arresting 36 people, and the fact that now it's international news, it's being covered by us on High at 9. I'm sure it's going to be covered by a bunch of other people. I just don't know that it's the best look. I think if they wanted to like quickly mitigate and cauterize the negative press that this would likely generate, you know, the president or whomever is in charge of that region comes in and sort of says, you know, mass dismissal, my bad. You know, our shift supervisor was a little aggressive and got carried away. But if they actually take these and run them through the entire process post arrest to try to create further consequence for those 36 people arrested, this is just not a really good look. I think it's important for countries to not just take the temperature internally about what their citizens want and believe is the just path moving forward, but also to take the temperature internationally and to say, okay, on the world stage, is this how we want to be perceived?
Mm-hmm. Fair enough. And on that, we got to go to a commercial. We're going to be right back. The Control Tower from Highly Educated has perfected the dab. Utilizing the concept of thin film evaporation, you can waste none of it and taste all of it. The micro texture of the SE pillar increases nucleation at elevated temperatures. And with the tower propelling at 2,600 RPMs, it's certainly the most efficient dab experience to date. The Control Tower from Highly Educated. Up next, that's right, it's her grand debut here at High at 9 Noons is none other than Miss Jamie Pearson. She's the CEO of Bang, and here to put a bang in your day. That's right, it is none other than Miss Jamie Pearson.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, welcome to Mondays.
Little correction, though. I'm no longer the CEO of Bang. I haven't been there for 2 years.
Oh, I'm sorry. My bad.
No worries.
My bad.
No worries.
I'll still always know you as that.
I brought it earlier today because it's still a huge part of my cannabis legacy. But I'm running an international company called New Holland Group now, and I do work with mostly brands in Europe. They either want to come to America or I help American brands that want to go to Europe. So
nice. That's
what I'm doing now. But thank you for having me. It's my pleasure. And, you know, Yarrow was the one that brought it up. And I'm glad you did because I started watching and I think it's great.
Love it. It's all you, Jamie. Yep. Go for it.
Yeah. So I picked this article that came out today in the Green Market Report about Earl Blumenauer, who's, you know, been a longtime proponent of cannabis out of Oregon. He indicated he's not going to run for re-election. And in his sort of farewell tour, he's taking shots directly at politicians because he's fed up and he wants to see cannabis become legalized. He's a huge friend of our industry. And so the headline says, could marijuana help Biden keep the White House? Blumenauer thinks so. This is a really interesting article. In an exit interview of sorts, longtime Oregon Congressman and cannabis champion Earl Blumenauer strongly implied that if Biden re-election campaign were smart, it would wrap both arms around the marijuana legalization ballot measure in Florida. Blumenauer, who founded the Congressional Cannabis Caucus in 2017 and has reliably been a champion of reform in D.C., announced last year he wouldn't seek re-election and is one of the people that is pushing for the rescheduling of cannabis and has been doing that for years. So the article goes on to say, if I were Joe Biden trying to get right with young voters, particularly with young voters of color, and to atone for being on the wrong side of the failed war on drugs, this is the issue to champion. In almost every state where cannabis legalization has been on the ballot, it passes overwhelmingly, often outperforming the same politicians who are reluctant to embrace it. There is no longer any risk for embracing cannabis legalization. To the contrary, Joe Biden himself owes his 2020 victory in Arizona to the young voters who turned out en masse for the ballot measure to legalize cannabis. That resulted in a 30,000 vote margin of victory for Biden in Arizona, Blumenauer asserted. The reason that Democrats control the Senate can be attributed to U.S. Senator John Fetterman's, he's Pennsylvania, longtime advocacy for legalization. There is no doubt in my mind that that was the source of his very narrow margin that resulted in being elected to the Senate, making Chuck Schumer majority leader. Blumenauer went further to say he believes the elections of John Ossoff and Raphael Warnock in Georgia, which gave Democrats a slim majority in the Senate, was due to the fact that neither candidate scorned marijuana. He said, I will use every opportunity to make the point that cannabis can help Democrats win in 2024. In the Florida issue is that you've got this adult use ballot on cannabis on the November ballot. And reading between the lines, it's not much of a stretch when you look at Florida being a swing state and the hanging chads and DeSantis and all of that Democrats, he's basically telling them, get with the program there in Florida. But he's got a 3-part, I'm just going to truncate this for time. He's got a 3-part argument for why he thinks Biden should embrace cannabis right away. And number one, he says it's low-hanging fruit politically, and that because Governor Ron DeSantis is a opponent of marijuana, he thinks that if Biden were to go on the offensive and go pro-cannabis in Florida, he's, taking on something that's actually going to help Floridians. Second of all, he's saying that in that state, that's a big swing state, and if he could win that state based on the fact that there is a cannabis legalization ballot, historically, that's proven successful for the Democrats. And then the last thing is he's saying it used to be historically dicey to propose the legalization of cannabis. Now it's been proven to lift campaigns up. So he's saying there's no reason for them not to do it, and he's telling them, get with the program.
Well. Jamie, I agree with a lot of the things that you said in this whole story. I agree with a lot of them. It is true that elections, when cannabis is involved, do tend to sway towards Democrats. That is 100% true. But the fact that they think that Joe Biden has a chance of winning Florida is just batshit crazy to me. There is absolutely no way Joe Biden could win the state of Florida. I don't think there's any mathematical equation that could do that.
Let me jump in because I love to disagree. I don't know that Joe Biden has to win Florida. I just know that there needs to be enough people in Florida who are afraid of a second Trump term who might vote for any alternative. And so Trump keeps running his mouth.
I think Americans are more scared of Joe Biden than they are of Trump.
Well, that's the debate of the day, right? Mm-hmm. But Trump keeps saying a lot of stuff that I continue to think alienates not just voters based on position, but also based on persona and decorum, which doesn't seem to be his forte. So I think there are many voters, and we always talk about those swing voters. If I was a swing voter, I would be watching the way in which Trump hasn't acted very presidential before, during, or after being a president. And, the trip to a McDonald's doesn't make him an everyman guy, right? And so, I just think that Biden doesn't have to win so much as he can be the default. I think a lot of people will vote for Biden just because it's a vote against Trump. The other thing that I think is really interesting about what this politician is saying is everything he's saying, I agree with. The problem for me is he should be saying this to Biden, not to the press, right? Mm-hmm. We don't need to hear that that's your thoughts. Biden needs to hear that that's your thoughts. And Biden hasn't made good on his promises around cannabis reform and has done this incredibly manipulative victory lap with him and Kamala around the modest policy reforms that they've done, and it's disingenuous. And if I am a voter where this is a policy position that matters to me, and I watch somebody gaslighting me into taking a victory lap before they've done much, and they're modest little incremental things, it reeks of bullshit. And I think that the American public understands bullshit. And if Biden wanted to do something, Biden has had a lot of time to do something. He's had a lot of strategists who have probably been in his ear saying, you could take a stand and help differentiate yourself. I think there are only 3 issues that are really going to matter to the American public when it comes to this next election. Cannabis could be one of them. Women's right to reproductive choices between them and their doctor is, in my opinion, the single greatest issue on the ballot this next election. There's the economy, stupid. And that's those things that if Biden can get on track and maybe punch back a little bit, like, yes, it's great to be presidential. And I'm not angry at you for stuttering, but you get hit below the belt so much that if you don't start hitting back a little bit, that sort of statesman approach of trying to like rise above the fray, I think people want to see that he's a fighter and he's got some moxie. Because when people say they like Trump, that's what they say they like about him.
Mm-hmm. That's fair.
I think the victory lap, so to speak, was a litmus test, because I really do believe he's been in the establishment for so long that he's got people telling him they're doing everything they do based on whatever the polling numbers are. I don't think he took a victory lap because he really gives a shit about cannabis. I think everything is politics.
Yeah, he's just gaslighting
and the
all the
reality
weed voters.
is Trump, I hate to say it, I can't stand the guy, but I think he's going to win. Yep. I think he's going to win. And I hope you're right, Yarrow. I hope people are going to vote for anything but Trump, but I just don't. I think if anything, to me, the fact that Trump went out and sold Bibles, like if you are somebody who cares about saving people's souls, you give them the fucking Bible. You don't sell it to them. And it's super offensive that he did that. But his Christian right followers bought their Bibles. Like everything that happens with him blows my mind.
I thought it was fantastic.
And I just think you can't underestimate the stupidity of sheeple.
I think he's a marketing genius that he could even get people to buy Bibles. I thought that was fantastic. I was like, good for him. But I operate out of a capitalistic mindset, so maybe that's why I like it. You know, I remember when you'd go to raves and they'd sell you a bottle of water for $20. And I used to be like, oh man, bro.
That was also criminal, Jason. And I threw raves. The only other thing I've ever done except cannabis and real estate is I was a rave promoter for years. And the $20 bottle of water to people who may or may not be under the influence of other things is both criminal and it's a safety issue. And so at our parties, we always had free water right there next to the sold water. And the sold water was capped at a certain price because water was a safety issue. So raves are not necessarily a good example because that was capitalism gone awry.
They are a
with
good
the black
example.
light.
They are a good example because people are going to pay.
But also, Jason, you have the right to go home and get water or leave the rave and go get water and not pay that $20.
But no one's going to do that. No one's going to do that.
Right?
They're all yeah, they're all in their whole thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And so, I mean, I agree with you. I think the person offering the bottles for $20, the person on the other end of that transaction has a choice. They're just not. But I love that part of your heart, Yarrow, where you're giving water away for free. And it is a safety issue because people are on drugs at raves. I mean, we don't have to dance around that. They are.
Oh, they're dancing around too.
This is my thing. In Europe, everyone kept saying to me, oh my God, are we going to have Trump again? Are we going to have Trump again? The Europeans are dreading this. And they all believe he's going to win also. And they're like, can't your country come up with two better candidates than these two guys? Like, what's going on over there? But the reality is nobody wants to be president unless I think the people that we need to be president will never be president because it becomes a circus. Your whole life becomes a circus. And
I think Biden's greatest contribution to the Democratic Party might have been not running this time.
That would have been, but the Democratic Party way isn't allowing for that to happen.
New blood. If there had been somebody much younger, much differentiated, with some North Stars in their moral compass, and they had some things they cared about, and to hell with the polling numbers. I mean, there's just not enough. There are differences, but Biden sat on the sidelines and took that sabbatical for that one term, and then no one wants to run two times. Like, he's not young. Trump's not young. There were a lot of good people in the Democratic Party that would have been better contenders. And I would say the same thing about the Republican Party, too. There's some young up-and-comers there, feisty, trying to make a name. I mean, God, I'd take Rubio over Trump.
Little Marco, huh?
I mean, I don't want Trump. I don't want either one of them. We got to do better.
I can't.
We got to do better.
Oh man, Trump! I can't wait for Trump to win. I'm gonna be excited for this. But nonetheless, I know. It's okay.
Here's the thing, Jason. Anytime a grown-ass man goes on record and calls people of color, rapists and drug dealers, and he grabs women by the pussy and all these things. He's telling you unapologetically what he thinks he has the right to do with other human beings.
I'm not buying into that. I don't buy into all that. Okay, because I believe that actions speak louder than words. And prior to Trump ever running for election and all of that, you had everybody from everywhere that wanted to be around Trump. Every single rapper, every single social justice activist, everybody wanted to be around Trump and wanted to get their picture with Trump and everything like this. And so I don't buy any of that. To me, that's all just hoopla that all came up through the election. So I'm not buying a lot of that type of narrative. But nonetheless, we're not here to debate whether or not about Trump. We're here to go over the news today. And so Yarrow,
Blumenauer came out and said that because I think he's right.
That's all good. I like Ed and I like Earl, and Congressman Blumenauer is right about a lot of those things. But I don't think even cannabis could save Joe Biden at this point right now.
Unfortunately, I think you're right. And Yarrow, your point about reproductive freedoms, I think however record number of voters that voted for Trump are happy with what happened. So hopefully what will happen is it will cause more young people to come out and vote. That's the only thing that could get Biden over the hump, is if he can get the young vote out.
Yep. And Yarrow, we're going to roll into... do we have one more commercial, Adam? All right, we'll be right back. I'm Jason Beck, and this is Smoky Vanilla. And if you want to feel as good as I look, then you need to get a stretch and smoke with Smoky Vanilla.
Hi, I'm Smoky Vanilla. I have my bachelor's degree in kinesiology, and I'm a sports massage therapist and stretch coach. I focus mostly on individuals that are in sport with chronic pain or injury. I love to intuitively create and customize a session based on the individual that I'm working with. We'll go over a few postural assessments, work together to create a wellness journey based on the health history, past injuries, or anything still affecting you today. And we'll get you back on your feet right away with less pain.
We're about to stretch, and then we're gonna smoke, because we're gonna get on our stretch and smoke. If you want to feel as good as I look, then you need to come on down and get a stretch and smoke with none other than Smoky Vanilla. Oh, yes. Coming up next, this is the Sebastopol Sage, who loves peanut butter and jelly sandwiches on top of doing real estate, sometimes cannabis. And if there's some money in the play, then there may be some cannabis and real estate involved as well. That's right, is none other than Mr. Yarrow Kubrin.
Oh God, it's hard, these intros without where's the canned applause? I want that canned applause.
Sorry, bro. Next week you'll get that. Next week.
All right. Well, I'm going to keep it political, just like my new cohort, Jamie Pearson. And my article today, good morning, Monday, April 22nd. My article today is about Utah, God's country. GOP senator, this is from Marijuana Moment. Ben wrote another one. Thank you, Senor Adlin, for your byline here. GOP senator is wrong about international treaties preventing marijuana rescheduling, cannabis companies and advocacy organizations say. Dozens of marijuana companies and advocacy groups are pushing back against Senator Mitt Romney, Utah's recent claims that the U.S. would be in violation of international drug treaty agreements if it rescheduled cannabis to Schedule 3 of the Controlled Substance Act. In a letter sent to Romney this month, more than 50 organizations said the senator made, quote, inaccurate claims that neither reflect the current state of medical and scientific knowledge about marijuana nor an accurate application of relevant treaties to proposed reforms, unquote. Signatories, including major marijuana businesses, industry groups, law firms, ancillary businesses, and cannabis advocacy organizations said in an April 9th letter that they wanted to correct the record. Late last month, Romney and Senator James Risch, R. Indiana, and Pete Ricketts, R. sent in a letter to the Drug Enforcement Administrator Ann Kilogram, arguing that the rescheduling marijuana, as recommended by the Department of Health and Human Services, will put the U.S. out of compliance with international treaty obligations and make it harder to ensure that other countries continue to enforce drug laws, including the deadly narcotics like fentanyl. The news industry and advocacy group responses contend that Romney's understanding of the law is out of date. Your letter cites a 1977 decision from the U.S. Court of Appeals for the D.C. Circuit describing obligations under the single convention that would not be met if marijuana were reclassified under Schedule 3, it says. However, in the many years since the court weighed in, the UN Commission on Narcotic Drugs voted to reclassify cannabis in recognition of its medical uses. Moving marijuana to Schedule 3, as recommended by the HHS, simply acknowledges this accepted reality. The U.S. is not under any applicable treaty to keep marijuana in Schedule 1 or 2 under the CSA. So long as certain requirements are met, the drug treaties provide the U.S. with the flexibility to classify relevant substances based on scientific and medical evidence and in accordance with domestic laws such as the CSA. The U.S. Department of State addressed this in the fall of 2023 during an intersessional meeting of the UN's Commission on Narcotic Drugs, stating that the single convention is primarily focused on drug trafficking and has an international rather than domestic focus. Ever since news leaked in August that the Department of Health and Human Services had sent a recommendation to the DEA that marijuana would be rescheduled as a Schedule 3 drug, some have warned that the move could still hit legal snags. One of the open questions is whether the U.S. interpretation of international drug law would block the proposal. Officials and advocates have interpreted the country's duties under those treaties in competing ways. Among those who've raised concern is Representative Andy Harris, Maryland, who raised the issue in a letter to the DEA Administrator Milligram in January, claiming that any reclassification that puts marijuana outside of Schedule 1 or 2 would, quote, constitute a violation of the Single Convention, referring to the 1961 United Nations Single Convention on Narcotic Drugs. In 2016, the DEA said in a denial of cannabis rescheduling petition that, in the view of the United States obligations under international drug control treaties, marijuana could not be placed in a schedule less restrictive than Schedule 2. But a coalition of 12 senators pointed out in a separate letter to Milligram a week before this other letter was sent that the UN has since revised global cannabis scheduling policies and allowed other member states, such as Canada, to legalize and regulate marijuana without penalty. Those lawmakers urged the DEA to legalize marijuana completely. Earlier this month, meanwhile, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said his government's concern about possible UN penalties for legalizing marijuana never materialized, disclosing that no officials have so much as discussed the issue with Canada since the reform was acted in 2018. The Prime Minister was a chief proponent of legalization, and the government has defended its decision to advance the reform, including at a meeting of the UN Commission on Narcotic Drugs in 2020. In February, a group of lawyers specializing in cannabis argued in a legal opinion that international drug treaties ought not stand in the way of moving marijuana to Schedule 3. In fact, it said a move to Schedule 3 would better uphold the country's broader obligations under international law to regulate cannabis in a way that protects public health and safety. The new letter to Romney echoes many of that opinion's arguments. The current placement of marijuana under Schedule 1 prevents the U.S. from ensuring the substance availability for medical and scientific research as required by the Single Convention, it says. Reclassification under Schedule 3 would therefore bring the U.S. closer to compliance with the treaty requirements. Meanwhile, the HHS has reportedly requested a legal opinion on the implications of possible marijuana rescheduling from the Justice Department's Office of Legal Counsel, and some suspect it concerns the potential international treaty consequences. Representative Earl Blumenauer, D. Oregon, has requested clarification on the request from the HHS. A Democratic Congresswoman has separately implored DEA to reject any argument that rescheduling marijuana under federal law would constitute a violation of international treaty obligations. She also asked the agency to reveal a list of any outside partners it has met with to discuss the global implications of a potential cannabis reclassification. The UN International Narcotics Control Board did recently reiterate that it considers legalizing marijuana for non-medical or non-scientific purposes a violation of international treaties. Here's a list of the groups that signed the letter to Romney, as well as a copy of the letter itself. Acreage Holdings, Ascend Wellness, Asian Americans for Cannabis Education, American Trade Association for Cannabis and Hemp, Ire Wellness, Bada Bloom, Balance Veterans Network, Cannabis Company, Conbud, shout out to New York, Cresco Labs, Dutchie, didn't have a good POS day on 420,
Yeah,
so
they
sorry.
crashed.
Good day. Yeah, that would have been my article. But anyway, Good Day Farms, Green Thumb Industries, Hemp for Victory, Hero Grown, Holistic Solutions, Holistic Industries, Housing Work, IVA, Jushi, Justice Foundation. Shout out. They're awesome. Thank you. Kush Culture Industry, Law Enforcement Action Partnership, Loom Cannabis, Major Bloom, Majority Minority Group, Mark Enterprises, Marijuana Policy Project, Moody Day, National Cannabis Roundtable, National Hispanic Cannabis Council, Native Roots Dispensary, New York Card Coalition, Jason, what's up? New York for Social Equity and Economic Equity, Perkins Coal, PharmaCann, Phylos Bio, Physicians Research Center, Porter Wright, PPP Dispensary, Quality Roots, Queen City Remedies, Realm for Caring, Santa Cruz, NorCal, thank you, Veterans Alliance, Scott's Miracle Grow. Hey, good for you all. Simply Pure Trenton, Tetragram, the Bronx Community Foundation, the Travel Agency, the Weldon Project, True Leaf, Tortura Capital, United States Cannabis Council, Valley Wellness. I mean, it's like a whole article just to go through the names of people who signed this. Verano Holdings, Vincente, hey, shout out to my lawyers. Juana Brands, Nancy, congratulations. Wow, Veterans Cannabis Project. So let me kick off my opinion before I hand this back to my other esteemed guests and panelists to hear what they think and what they have to say. The United States has an oversized influence on what happens at the UN, not just because of how much money it contributes, not just because of where the UN offices are located, because at the end of the day, the United States gives no fucks and does whatever it wants to do. If that was a problem, we wouldn't have black sites and rendition and waterboarding during the last Persian Gulf War, right? Like the Iraq War. We did whatever we wanted. UN conventions, articles, Geneva Conventions, whatever. We're going to just kidnap some people from their country, do illegal renditions. The United States, under Obama, assassinated an American citizen with a drone strike in absentia on foreign soil. This is not a Republican or Democratic thing. The United States does what it wants to do. So if Canada, our maple syrup neighbors to the north, aren't having problems with this and are stating as much, why is it that we think that this rationalization that we have to be in compliance with something when most of the time we set the goalpost ourselves would ever be a reason why we wouldn't have a bit more coherent federal policy that allows the patchwork of state policies to not be incongruent with federal policy and not be a source of consternation when it comes to our compliance with international treaties and laws. This is Yarrow Kubrin, High at 9 News. I'd like to know what y'all think.
Well, Yarrow, I mean, I happen to agree with them is that America's going to do what it wants to do, and I don't think that this treaty argument is enough to stall or give a reason to not move it. But I still don't want it to go to Schedule 3. But nonetheless, I personally agree with this article.
Well, the UN. The council that controls drug scheduling moved cannabis off of Schedule 1 at the UN level. So they're already moving at the UN in the right direction. The fact that they never have said boo to Canada that federally legalized for adult use is information. And I can tell you this, that piece of information was a huge turning point in the German legalization movement. Because when Germany was using the UN treaty as part of the reason that they weren't going to legalize and they were pushing things back, that's when Trudeau stepped up and said, hey, we haven't had any problems. And then the German government was like, all right, look, we need that money. I mean, that's really what it boiled down to. The interesting thing for me about the Germans on that argument was, it wasn't just that they were going after tax dollar. This is the argument that I found really profound. They are talking about harm reduction and the financial implications of harm reduction caused by the war on drugs, specifically the amount of money they spend on police, but more so the amount of money that they spend. Remember, it's a socialist government with socialized medicine. The amount of money that they spend on therapy and programs for the traumatized children of people who've gone to jail. So they're talking about the societal harm reduction savings, and they are attributing that to be somewhere in the neighborhood of $5 billion. So the Romney attempt to try to scare everybody, oh, the UN, it's just more scare tactics, or it's a litmus test, just to get people talking about it like we are now. I don't believe it for 1 second. Utah has a thriving medical marijuana program, and Romney himself is seeing the benefits of that legalization in his state. So I can't imagine he's doing anything other than a political litmus test.
Mm-hmm. I would agree with that. It's just he's just throwing stuff out there to see what sticks, see who it resonates with and whatnot. Just I could agree with that 100%.
I think there's a world in which Utah has some of the worst issues with opioids and the risks that has created, the impact that has created on their younger generations. I think there's some data that suggests that access to regulated cannabis reduces use of other substances, including alcohol. And so, in addition to the public benefits that Jamie talked about, there could be a harm reduction component to increasing the availability of laboratory tested, safe, supply chain regulated, age restricted cannabis in Utah.
Mm-hmm.
Amen.
Mm-hmm. I agree. All right, I'm just going to read this last headline, and we're not even going to discuss it. I'm just going to let you guys know. If you want to check out more about this topic, you can head over to our website at www.highat9news.com. But they're saying search warrants detail undercover buys and seizure of cash and ATMs from cannabis-related shops. Now, these are all head shops in the state of Virginia that this article is referencing. And if you want to know more about what is happening in Virginia in regards to this, you can head over to our website at www.highat9news.com. And in closing, thank you guys all whoa, where'd he go? There we go. Thank you all so much for getting high at 9 with us every Monday through Friday at 9 a.m. Pacific and high noon on the East Coast. Big thank yous to our audience and supporters for tuning in and listening to the insanity that is the developing cannabis industry. Huge thank you to all of our sponsors, cloud media partners, and everyone else that is involved with everything. Adam over there in New York, thank you so much, Adam. And thank you all, Jamie, Yarrow, and everyone at home for all tuning in and getting high at 9 with us. It is America's #1 daily cannabis news show.